Hey there and welcome. Have you ever been watching a stand-up special, just dying of laughter, and wondered what is actually going on inside your head? You know, it feels so simple. You hear a joke, you laugh. But underneath all that, your brain is running this incredibly fast, super complex operation. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the neuroscience of how your brain processes a stand-up comedy.
So let's just jump right in with the big question. What exactly happens in your brain when a joke really, truly lands? What's that sequence of events that takes you from hearing a comedian's setup to that amazing feeling of amusement? It's a pretty wild journey from confusion to clarity, and believe it or not, it all happens in less than a second.
All right, so the first big concept we need to get our heads around is what neuroscientists call the surprise and the solve. See, humor isn't a passive thing. You're not just listening. Your brain is actively working. It's solving this tiny, delightful puzzle that the comedian has just laid out for you.
And the theory behind almost all of this is right here, the incongruity resolution theory. The easiest way to think about it is that your brain is a detective. First, it spots something that just doesn't fit, the incongruity. It's that wait, what? Moment. That's the surprise. Then, it immediately gets to work, looking for a hidden clue that makes it all make sense in a new, totally unexpected way. That's the resolution.
And this breaks down that whole flow perfectly. The comedian starts a story, that's the setup, and your brain builds a little mental model, predicting where this thing is going. Then, bam, the punchline comes in and shatters that model. That violation is the surprise. But it's not just chaos. Your brain instantly starts working to find a new, clever frame that connects the setup and the punchline together. And that aha moment, that's the resolution.
Okay, so if our brain is playing detective, let's meet the actual investigators on the case. Which specific parts of the brain are doing all this heavy lifting, and just how fast are they solving the puzzle?
So, say hello to your brain's cognitive toolkit. First up, your language centers, in an area called the temporal gyrus, basically flag the punchline and go, whoa, hold on, that doesn't compute. Then, another part, the TPJ, tries to figure out the comedian's intention. It's trying to get inside their head. Finally, the lead detective, the inferior frontal gyrus, steps in to crack the case, while the prefrontal cortex has to literally shove your first logical interpretation out of the way to make room for the funnier one.
And this is all happening at an absolutely blistering pace. At just 400 milliseconds, your language centers do a quick first pass. A split second later, your prefrontal cortex detects the twist. And then, in less than a full second, after 700 milliseconds, your right hemisphere finds that clever new connection. The joke is literally solved before you've even had a chance to blink. It's incredible.
So how in the world do we know all this? Well, scientists use different tools for different jobs. An fMRI is kind of like a GPS for the brain. It shows us where the activity is happening with amazing precision, but it's a little slow. MEG and EEG, on the other hand, are like a stopwatch. They track the electrical activity down to the millisecond to show us when each step is happening. You really need both to get the full picture.
Okay, so your brain has done all this hard cognitive work. It's detected the surprise, it's solved the puzzle. So what's the reward for all that effort? Well, that brings us to the best part, the payoff, that actual feeling of amusement. Because, solving the puzzle's only half the battle. The real magic of stand-up comedy is that jolt of pure pleasure you get when the punchline lands. This is the moment where your brain's cognitive centers hand off the baton to your emotional and reward circuits. And this is the key. When you get the joke, your brain floods its reward system with feel-good chemicals. A critical part of this, the nucleus accumbens, is your core pleasure center. This is the same system that lights up for things like delicious food or winning money. Then other areas like the amygdala and insula come in and add all the emotional flavor, creating that internal feeling we call funniness.
This quote just nails the whole sequence. The cognitive part, the puzzle solving, is basically a gatekeeper. Your brain doesn't just give you that feel-good rush for free. Nope. You have to earn it by successfully figuring out the joke first. No solve, no reward. It's really that simple.
But of course, we all know comedy is super subjective. What one person finds absolutely hilarious, another might just shrug out. And that brings us to our next question, why do we all laugh differently? It turns out you can actually see these differences right down at the neural level. Now, some of the research here points to some really fascinating patterns, especially when looking at average differences between the sexes. Some studies show that females, on average, tend to have greater activation in the left prefrontal cortex. This suggests a more detailed, kind of language-based analysis of the joke. And the result? Well, they also tend to show greater activation in the nucleus accumbens, which means a stronger reward response.
The main hypothesis for why this happens is pretty cool.
The idea is that a more rigorous analysis creates a more specific prediction in the brain. So when the punchline comes and just shatters that very specific prediction, the surprise is even bigger. Think of it like this. Your brain bets on where the joke is going. The further the punchline is from that bet, the bigger the surprise, and the bigger the pleasure payout. It's a bigger reward for a bigger mental leap.
And it's not just about our biology. Experience plays a massive role. It literally rewires the brain. Take comedians. When novices try to write a joke, their brains show this effortful, top-down search for ideas. But professional comedians, their brains are way more efficient. They tap into regions that generate spontaneous, creative thoughts. For them, finding the funny isn't this deliberate search. It's become an intuitive, almost automated reflex.
So, we've gone from the setup to the solution to the reward. Now it's time for the final step in our journey, connecting that internal feeling of amusement to the physical act of laughing out loud. Now, this is a really critical distinction to make. The cognitive appreciation of a joke, getting it, that's a high-level process in your cortex. But the physical motor pattern of laughter, that's controlled by more ancient, primitive structures deep in the brainstem. This is why you can find a joke funny without actually laughing, or why some medical conditions can cause laughter without any feeling of amusement. The two things are separate.
So, to wrap it all up, here is the whole cascade one last time. It all starts with the linguistic stage, detecting the problem. Then the executive stage kicks into gear to solve it. The coherent stage is that glorious aha moment when the right hemisphere finds the new meaning. And finally, the affective stage delivers that sweet, sweet reward.
And that brings us to a final thought to leave you with. We've seen how one person's brain processes a joke, but stand-up comedy is a social experience, right? The sound of a roaring crowd is completely contagious. So the question is, how does hearing all that collective laughter prime your brain's reward and social circuits and actually change how you experience the very next punchline? It's a whole other layer to the amazing shared joy of comedy. Thanks for diving into this with me.